Hello class. Now, this is actually the part 2 of the topic of photosynthesis we're looking at in last lesson. But today we are actually going to be looking at the factors that affect photosynthesis, okay? That is something we didn't talk about last lesson, and that is what we're going to cover today. But before we begin, what I would actually like you to do, like I said last lesson, make sure you have all your equipment with you, your pen, your pencil, your ruler, okay? Make sure you have everything, and your green pen as well. Okay, so take this time to pause the video and gather this equipment. Go. Okay, are you back? Brilliant. Now, our learning objective is to know the factors that actually affect photosynthesis. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is to actually write down the learning objective. Okay, so pause the video and write down the learning objective. Okay, can we move on? Brilliant. Now, our success criteria, okay? Like I said, we're looking at limiting factors. Now, hopefully we're able to identify the three limiting factors. We should be able to describe the photosynthesis graph, okay? And also, we should be able to evaluate growth conditions for optimum crop yield, okay? The word optimum means the best condition, okay, for crops, for plants to grow. Now, these are actually our keywords for today, okay? We've got the word photosynthesis, the light intensity, carbon dioxide concentration, and temperature. And this is what today's lesson is going to be focused on, okay? Now, there are three factors that can actually affect the rate of photosynthesis, okay? We've got the light intensity, we've got the carbon dioxide, yes, carbon dioxide concentration, and temperature. Now, from last lesson, we actually looked at the word equation for photosynthesis. What I would like you to do is actually to write down that word equation from last lesson. There's nothing wrong with you going back to your notes. Have a look, write it down, and actually circle, okay? Circle around the rate, one of the factors that appear on these three things. Now, if you don't get what I mean, what I'm trying to tell you to do is to write down the word equation, okay, of photosynthesis, and look at the three limiting factors, okay? Which one can you find on the equation? So have a look. Okay, are you done? Brilliant. Now, I'm sure by the time you look at it, you can see the fact that carbon dioxide is there because we know that carbon dioxide is involved in photosynthesis. Okay, light is also there. Remember, I talked about light as being the catalyst for the reaction to take place. Yes, we've also got, interesting enough, we've got what we call concentration of carbon dioxide. Yes, we've also got temperature. Now, that is very interesting. I know that temperature is not there in the equation, but we know about the light energy that is released. So the question now is, why do we think temperature affects the rate of reaction? That is something I would like to ask you. I need you to think about it and actually say out loud. Okay? Do you want to touch on the screen and actually tell me why you think temperature affects rate of reaction and affects photosynthesis? Okay, touch the screen. Yes. And say it out loud so that I can hear you. Well done, very close. Now, if you're able to link it with movement of particles, movement of matter, atoms, well done, really well done. Remember, when there's heat, what happens is atoms continue to move around faster and they begin to collide, okay? So increasing the temperature actually increases rate of reaction and also increases rate of photosynthesis at the same time. But obviously, we know that too much of everything is not exactly good. So it could be a limiting factor, okay? Now, let's move on. Now, without enough light, really, a plant cannot carry out photosynthesis very quickly. Even if there's plenty of water and carbon dioxide present, without light, okay, without enough light, then the rate of photosynthesis is going to be really low. If that makes sense. That is why sometimes when you go out, you're able to see some plant bending towards the sun, the direction of the sun, okay, in order to get as much light as possible. So without enough light, what's going to happen is the rate of photosynthesis is going to be really, really low, if that makes sense. So light actually boosts the speed of photosynthesis. Now, the question is, how could you increase light intensity? That is one question I needed to think about. How can you increase light intensity for plants? Okay. I can see what you're thinking about. Yes. The fact that you can actually have, let's say you've got a plant in your room, you can actually control how much light you give to the plant as well. So that is one way you can increase light intensity. So job well done for that. Now, let's look at the graph, okay? Remember I told you we're going to be looking at graphs, okay? Now, let's look at this light intensity graph. Now, the rate of photosynthesis will increase until it reaches what we call a threshold, okay? It reaches the optimum condition at which the rate cannot increase any further. So if you keep increasing so much light, what's going to happen is, yes, it's going to increase, the rate of photosynthesis will increase, and then when it reaches a certain level, it's not going to have any effect on the rate of photosynthesis again. It's just going to remain the same. If that makes sense, okay? So what I'd like you to do is, in 2 or 3 sentences, I'd like you to actually write down in your own word what is happening to the rate of photosynthesis with an increase in light intensity, just based on what we've described, in your own word. So pause the video and write it down. Okay, are you all done? Brilliant. Let's move on. Now, sometimes photosynthesis is limited by the concentration of carbon dioxide in the air, and you're wondering, really? But yes, in order for plants to make its own food, it needs the right amount of things, okay? Obviously, if you have too little, then it won't be able to have more than it needs, if you get what I mean. So sometimes photosynthesis is limited by the concentration of carbon dioxide in the air, even if there's plenty of light, okay? A plant cannot carry out photosynthesis if there's insufficient amount of carbon dioxide that it can use, okay? Remember, it's able to make glucose as its product at the very end, if that makes sense, okay? So it literally needs the right amount of carbon dioxide. Now the question is, what could limit the amount of carbon dioxide in the air, and how can we increase the proportion of carbon dioxide in a local environment? Now this is when I want you to think about when we don't want carbon dioxide to be formed, okay? So how can we increase or limit the amount of carbon dioxide in an area? All right, have you tried to answer that question in your book? Well done, well done. Now, the rate of photosynthesis will increase until it reaches a threshold, like we said before, at which the rate cannot increase any further. So remember, it's almost it's a similar pattern, really, okay? Because if you continue to increase the amount of carbon dioxide, the concentration of carbon dioxide, the rate of photosynthesis will increase, because why? It's got quite enough. Eventually, what's going to happen is that it wouldn't really affect the rate of photosynthesis again after it reaches a certain amount of concentration. Now, I want you to imagine it this way, okay? Imagine you've got 5 Pac-Man, okay? And we've got 5 Pac-Man, and we've got 5, let's say we've got 7 beans, okay? Every time the Pac-Man eats the beans, it disappears. Okay, are we making sense? Every time the Pac-Man eats the beans, it disappears. So imagine there are 6 beans and there are 5 Pac-Man, and each Pac-Man can only eat 1 beans, okay? 1 beans, okay? Eventually, the Pac-Man would have eaten all the beans and they would have all disappeared, and then it remains 1 beans, okay? Now, that 1 beans is left. That means it's not even being eaten by any other Pac-Man, because all the Pac-Man has eaten what they need to eat, okay? Imagine it that way. So sometimes if you have way too much, then they're going to be waste, okay? If you have too much carbon dioxide there, they're going to be waste there. They're not being used, and you don't want waste, okay? You want the right amount of it, if that makes sense. So like we've done in the last section, what I'd like you to do is to also describe what is happening to the rate of photosynthesis in your own word based on what we've just discussed, okay, using the graph. Okay, are you all done? Brilliant. Let's move on. Now, if it gets too cold, the rate of photosynthesis will decrease. Okay, there's not enough energy to move around. Okay, the plant cannot carry out photosynthesis if it gets too hot as well. Why? The plant is gonna die. Okay, the water the is gonna just get evaporated. Okay, so photosynthesis reaction cannot take place due to having a narrow temperature effectiveness window. Okay, and also this effectiveness window is different in different plants. Okay, it's very, very important you know the kind of plant that can withstand different temperatures. Okay, obviously we've got some plants in the desert, okay, that can withstand really, really, really high temperature, okay, when it's really, really hot. Why some plants can only survive when it's really, really cold. Why some plants are a bit of lukewarm, so that they can survive in neither hot or cold condition, if that makes sense. Okay, so it is so important to understand the type of plant you've got, okay, that can survive in different conditions. So the question now is, suggest a range of temperature that plants in the desert and in the Arctic can photosynthesize. Okay, suggest a range of temperature you think. Yes. Yes, brilliant. So plants in the desert might be able to survive about 40 to 50 degrees of temperature, okay? And we've got plants that are living in the Arctic, really, really cold condition, are able to survive things like minus 10, 20, 30 degrees, if that makes sense, which is really, really cold. Now, okay, now, think about the shape of the light intensity. Have a look, okay? And the carbon dioxide, okay? And the concentration, and the carbon dioxide concentration graph. How do you think the temperature graph will differ? I need you to actually sketch in your book right now how the photosynthesis, the temperature graph would differ from the rest. Do you think it's going to look the same or it's going to be different? Let's have a look. Come on. 30 seconds. Drop your graph. Okay. Are you done? Brilliant. Now, let's have a look. This is actually how it's going to look. Now, as you can see, what happens is, remember when I talked about the molecules and atoms moving really fast and colliding with each other? So the rate is actually going to increase. Yes. Until it gets to a threshold where what happens? The rate of photosynthesis decreases. It goes down. You know why? Because the plant is dead. All the enzymes are unable to function properly. And so the enzymes are denatured at that point, if that makes sense. Okay, so I don't know, did you get this right? We're able to predict this. So it is so important that you're able to actually differentiate this. Okay, light intensity and carbon dioxide concentration, the graph is very, very, very similar to each other. Only temperature where it actually decreases. Okay, remember that. Okay, now the next thing we're going to focus on is actually maximizing growth, and the best way we do that is actually in the greenhouse houses. Okay, this is the best way you can actually maximize growth for plants. Okay, now a lot of farmers actually use their knowledge of limiting factors to increase crop growth in greenhouses. Okay, they use things like paraffin lamps inside the greenhouse and increases the rate of photosynthesis, because the burning of the paraffin produces what? Carbon dioxide and heat too. So you can imagine how they do that. They are able to use their knowledge of these limiting factors to actually increase crop growth. Okay, now what's quite interesting is there's actually an area in the world where they actually create their own atmosphere and their own condition. I needed to go research that, but I do hope you've learned quite a lot from this video. Make sure you send us an email if you do not understand anything. Make sure you log on to Educake and try and answer the questions there. Okay, well done for taking part in this lesson, and I'll catch you in the next one.